right, tonight is a school vision night. This is different than we've seen before with our evening open house. This is something mainly for parents to learn more about the culture of the school, more about our curriculum. There's been many times where during open house or something, I want to keep talking and tell us more about classical education, and this is an opportunity for myself and then the teachers to do it. So sometimes an evening like this, we're planning on 2 a year, one in the fall and one in the spring. An evening like this will be an opportunity to discuss classical education in general, the big vision, what is it, going back to it, or something like part of our curriculum, which helps feed into and support that vision that we're looking forward to. So tonight is harmony and music that we're discussing with Mrs. Mueller here. But before we get started, let's pray, and then we'll dive in. Lord God, we thank you for this evening that you've given us. Lord, I thank you for this school, for this church, for the families involved in it, Lord. They have been such a blessing to one another and to myself. Lord, I pray that you would bless our conversations tonight, that the things we talk about, they'll be understandable, they'll still be hard and things to learn. We'll wrestle with them, but help us, Mrs. Mueller and myself, to be able to speak in a way that is that everyone here is able to understand, we're able to engage and be a blessing to everyone. Lord, I pray that this then impacts our homes and our church and building the culture that we're trying to harmonize and interweave among the home, the church, and the school, Lord. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so I'm starting off, this is going to be a discussion. I'm going to be starting off more with the big picture things. And big picture about harmony and discord in general, and then the two ways that it impacts our curriculum, which is the cultural area and then the actual liberal art of music. And then from there, Mrs. Mueller is going to take it away, and she's going to talk more about the music program and how that then fulfills our vision and more of the specifics of what it actually looks like, okay? So I'm going to start us off, just dive on in. So oftentimes when we talk about music, as Christians, we all know something important about music. We know we go to church, we sing songs, we sing praises, and something about it is important. But we don't always think deeply, like why we don't think about being made in the image of God, him making us in a certain way so that we can sing his praises and glorify him through song and dance and music, instruments, right? So we often think in the Old Testament, we know David, right? David's songs, he sang, wrote a lot of the Psalms. The Psalms, right, they're sometimes written to the choir master, so Israel could sing congregationally as well. So we know that's good. We know there's music in the Old Testament. We know the New Testament, we're commanded to sing hymns, songs, psalms, hymns, spiritual songs, right? So, okay, New Testament, Old Testament both say music. And then we go to church and we sing music, so it's good. But why? Why do we sing it? Why is it so important to the Christian? Why is it so important to the human being? And so I'm going to start off with kind of a big picture of harmony and discord, viewing harmony more as reality, a metaphor for reality itself. So if we think of the word shalom, right? And Pastor Matt recently talked about this word shalom, talking about war or the absence of war. And he stated it's multifaceted, it goes deeper than we really realize. Shalom is peace, right? But it's not just an inner peace that we have with ourselves. We're just satisfied with things. There's way more to this word shalom or peace. And so God created the world, right? He created it good. And at the end of the completing of all creation, he said it was very good. But we brought sin into the world, and that created a discord. It created sin and death, and it impacted everything. And so now we're looking for a redeemer. We're looking for everything to be made right again. In the garden, there was a right relationship between man and God, man and his fellow man and the created order and creation. Sin came in, and that was disrupted. There was a curse in the ground. Now man is separated from God. He's separated from his wife, from other humans. That relationship is distorted. And then the way we interact with creation is also, it's cursed. There's a distortion there as well. But God in his mercy gave us a way to bring back peace, redemption, right? If we think of the story of creation, fall, redemption, and consummation, it's creating harmony. It's reharmonizing everything. There's a discord in the world, there's sin and fallenness, and it's reharmonizing everything. On the final day, when Christ comes again, there's going to be a final peace, a final, full, complete shalom. The King will bring peace. And so everything will be restored. Relationship with God will be completely restored between God and man. A relationship between man and man will be restored. And how we relate to creation, the created order, will be restored. Everything will be working in perfect harmony. So if you think of different ways of describing harmony, you might say concord, resonance, consonance, unity, right? These are all those things will be then once we're perfected, right? Once we're perfected and we live in a glorified state, that's what we'll be living in a perfect harmony with God, our Creator, our fellow man, and the created order. But that's far off. The perfection is far off. What are we supposed to do now, right? We know we have this process called sanctification, which is us practicing, we're preparing for that perfect state, right? Christ has redeemed us. If you believe in Jesus Christ, he's created a way for you to be redeemed and pursue his glory here and now as well. And that leads then to our curriculum. Our curriculum, right, we say is to prepare image bearers to cultivate biblical wisdom, virtue, and affections. So image bearers of God, all of us in our curriculum, is to help us achieve the creation mandate that God said, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, and subdue it. And in the world, he had the flood, right? And he gave Noah the same thing. Be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, subdue it. And then he gave him laws, right? Or capital punishment. And that's the beginning of human institutions. Or maybe not the beginning, but that's him saying, you're going to need a way to protect the image of God. Well, so we're preparing for that. That's what every human being needs to do, is to obey the creation mandate. But we're also preparing for the Great Commission. And that's what our curriculum as a whole does. It's prepare our image bearers for the creation mandate and the Great Commission. So this idea of harmony. Harmony is a grand narrative of redemption and consummation happening in our lives. Now us preparing in that, now that we have been redeemed by Christ, and all human beings are participating in this grand story of God, it then goes down to, if that's a principle of harmony, if discord is bad, if discord is pulling apart, separating, dividing things, and harmony is weaving, uniting, bringing together, then that principle should also be involved in our overall scope and sequence. It should be involved in the way that we have our school day. In every subject that we teach, everything should be integrated. It should be intertwined. So that's how it also plays those principles of us bringing everything together and harmonizing them. Again, harmonizing, which is why it's such a blessing to be part of this school, is with the church, the school, and the home. Everything we're learning, we should be supporting one another. And Lena's going to be talking soon about what we're doing with music and how in the home we can be encouraging the same behavior or the same musical habits and the same, we say that music is actually moral, right? So the same musical morality in our homes as our church and our school as well. So then let's talk about, now I have two subcategories in our curriculum, formation and the liberal art of music, okay? In each of your report cards, you have a section that's a narrative section, and it's piety, music, and gymnastic. And whenever we talk about it or we have it on our website, we say those are the formational elements of the curriculum. You have formational element and then the skills, the liberal arts. So music, as it's formational, is something about tradition. It's you're cultivating through music a joy, a beauty, a poetic knowledge of the world, the way you interact. You're receiving a place. You're recognizing that you have a place and a people and a common language. And that's the formational element, and music plays such a strong role in that. We have here the quote from a pagan and a Christian. And so I'm going to read from Plato quick. And this has to do with classical education in general, how they view music being important. Plato says, more than anything else, rhythm and harmony find their way into the inmost soul and take strongest hold upon it. Rhythm and harmony find their way into the inmost soul and take strongest hold upon it. So here he's talking, we think of Plato as this philosopher, a big mind thinker, right? But here he's actually saying there's some way that music works its way past our reason into our soul, and we start to work with our affections, with our desires, with our emotions, with the way our parents raised us, rather than just what we're thinking and the truths that we hear. So there's something about music that can move us. And then many years later, 900 to 1,000 years later, a Christian, Boethius, he wrote this about music as well. He said, music is a part of us, and music either ennobles us or degrades our behavior. Music is a part of us, and either ennobles us or degrades our behavior. So both of these people in the classical tradition, and then now also a Christian in the classical tradition, is saying music is moral. It can ennoble us, it can raise us up, or it can degrade us. And so we would say we can both we have an impact of music, what we're playing, but also we might not know that the things we listen to, the things in the background, the words, not only the words, also the rhythms, those things can impact us as well. So this is the formational aspect. We need to be intentional about this. Our curriculum needs to be intentional about it because those shape the affections, right? We're going to know those songs. If you think the songs you still remember from growing up, right? There's so many of those things. We want to make sure that those are good, true, and beautiful songs. And as a Christian people, we want to make sure that it's connected to the history of the church as well. All right, so that's formational aspect. Now lastly, for my part, is more the liberal art of music, or sometimes called harmony. They're intertwined. So the liberal art, remember, an art is a skill. These are the skills of a free people. And so the liberal art of music is really mathematics. And Boethius is the one who called this the quadrivium. Quadrivium with liberal arts, the language arts, the mathematical arts. There's 4 mathematical arts of arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. And arithmetic and music are intertwined. They're very connected. When we are talking about then these arts of math, what we're talking about is the interpreting, the assembling, and the harmonizing of numbers. So the interpreting, how to read them, assembling, putting them together, and harmonizing numbers. And both arithmetic and music are considered discrete numbers, discrete quantities, individual quantities, whereas geometry and astronomy are continuous numbers. They're bodies, they're shapes, they're something that's whole already. And when you study geometry or astronomy, you're studying something that's whole, and then you're learning about the pieces of it. In arithmetic and music, you're learning about the little pieces, and then seeing how they harmonize and create a whole. This is like in logic with deductive and inductive reasoning. You start with a general truth in deductive reasoning, and then you find a single, simple truth from that one main truth. Or inductive, you start with one small truth, and it goes up to a more general truth as well. So that's the mathematical arts, logical, mathematical reasoning. So music. Music is measurement of discrete number, measurement of arithmetic, but within time. Okay, so if you think of a time scale on those music sheets, or if you open up a psalter or a hymnal, you see all those notes. That's telling us that note or that number, the sound of that number, and how it moves through time, and different sounds, discrete numbers, as they come together, harmonizing. All right? So we have harmony and discord. It's both a general mega theme of harmonizing things together, it's enculturating, and it's a mathematical liberal art. And so I believe our music program is what kind of actually combines all of them. And so I'm going to then leave it off to you, and I might ask you some questions while you go along.
Okay. Yeah, what you were saying about the formative aspect, it's so obvious to see that in music with these little ones and just the joy of singing the songs. but also now we are entering in on that liberal art. At first, when we started the music program, we were like, oh, this is great, this is formative, the little ones will love it. But now, seeing the depth of what they're learning and how mathematical it is, we're realizing, oh, this is actually the liberal art, this is the skill. And for me, I was just like, oh my, I'm Boethius right here, you know, doing something very profound. No, not really, but yeah, so I'm gonna go into the details of the music program for you all. It's definitely not gonna be a deep dive, as all things are very complex. It's gonna be a relaxing swim in the ideas and practices behind our music program here. Curriculum-wise, I'm gonna disappoint you. I don't think any of you are here to develop your own music program, but there is no curriculum. Sorry if that sounds kind of weird to you. I do have,
There is.
I am the curriculum. So for $60,000, you can sit with me. No, I'm kidding. But if you are interested, I would not be opposed to that. I do love talking about it, so here we go.
Sorry to throw you off.
No,
I
you're
have to
totally
admit,
fine.
curriculum is the whole path that you take, right?
Oh, okay.
So it is everything that we do is part of the curriculum. Even when your kids hear the teachers talk in the kitchen or something like that, and they experience those things, everything they experience throughout their whole trajectory or path they take here is part of the curriculum. And so music, the play they do, and all that, it is part of the curriculum.
Yes. Sorry.
And we're
I meant
developing
I don't
it
have a
more
book
officially.
that I'm checking my boxes in and doing. I said it in the most lame way. I understand. Okay. But I do have objectives and standards that I go by, which are catered to the age and the ability of the child. And as my education continues, I'm gradually collecting more and more materials that will be helpful, hopefully, in the future. So let's jump in. I've got 3 questions that I'm going to hope to answer. The who of music literacy, as it pertains to us, the what, and the why. See, I have that memorized. Aren't you proud? So starting off with the who, the method we use for music literacy is called the Kodály methodology, which is named after a man named Zoltán Kodály, and he was a Hungarian composer in the 20th century. He developed this method because his country was in dire straits. He saw that the smallest percentage of people were musically literate, and though he wasn't a Christian, he realized that this was very detrimental to not only just the individual human, but also to the society as a whole. And so he decided to go on a journey into the sticks of Hungary. He's quoted saying this, though, music making is not an end in itself. It must stand at the service for the whole people. Real art is one of the most powerful forces in the rise of mankind, and he who renders it accessible to as many people as possible is a benefactor of humanity. So the way that he went about this is by going to the roots of his culture. And he went into the sticks of Hungary and, you know, with shepherds and whoever, and he learned their folk culture. He learned all of the folk songs along with his friend Bela Bartok, and they documented all of the Hungarian folk songs down, which hadn't been done. It was by word of mouth, obviously. So they documented them all down, and they used them to teach the Hungarian children in their mother tongue the elements of music. And the reason he used the folk song, well, before I go into that, folk song, just want to define my terms for you. It just means people's song, you know, folk song. It's very simple, people's song. But the most important aspect that he saw about these folk songs is that they were passed down from generation to generation, which meant that they had some sort of a lasting quality to them. Because Kodály was musically literate, he could see that these songs, even though the people who sang them couldn't see this, he could see that these songs were musically excellent. They had all of those complex musical concepts in them, but they were very simple because they were made from the people, just from their hearts, just as what came out of them. And he knew that there was a profound ability to speak to human understanding and affections of the soul because of that it came just from the simple outworking of these people. He's quoted actually saying, and remember, this guy's a composer. He says, in the traditional or folk songs, the emotions of centuries are immortalized in a form polished to perfection. No masterpiece can replace folk traditions. That's really strong words for a reputable composer. Kodai's method of music literacy centers on the human voice, and this is very unique. You see a lot of, like the Suzuki method, if you've ever heard of that. It's instrumental with piano and violin, and that's basically your gateway to any other instrument. But Kodai was very strong on this point of it centering on the human voice. He even says this: "You have an instrument in your throat with more beautiful tone than any violin in the world, if only you will use it. There must be a strenuous attempt to replace music that comes from fingers and the mechanical playing of instruments with music from the soul and based on singing." And he used to talk about that all the time in his writings, that he knew so many of his students that would just play music, but they didn't feel anything. They were just mimicking the sound that they read on the page. And this point, he's not a Christian, but this point really reminded me of the Imago Dei and just how spectacular singing is. The Bible says that God will rejoice over Israel with glad singing. Something that he does as a spiritual being is singing, a spiritual reality there. Yet he fitted us with a physical self with tendons and muscles and blood flowing and wind passing through wiggling cartilage that makes that singing sound that he finds so glorious.
Wiggling.
You know, that physical aspect of his spiritual reality. It's just, that's a tangent you want to talk about, right?
No, I just like the word wiggling.
Well, I had to put that in there because it's
Could've
so
been more
visceral,
eloquent.
right? It's just your physical reality. Anyway.
Vibrations, right? It's
Yeah,
vibrations through the
vibrations,
air.
wiggling, you know.
Same.
Sorry, you're more learned
like
than I am. So yes, you do have the most glorious instrument, God's instrument of choice, right there in your throat. And from that instrument, the greatest, most God-glorifying music has been produced for hundreds of years. My other point about the what is, music is like phonics, which you probably have never heard before, maybe. Music is like phonics in that it's a sound to symbol language. I don't know if any of you have sat down with a 5-year-old to try and have them sound out their words, each letter by each letter. I know Mel is tracking with me right now. But that's very similar to music. In English, you can't hope to read or fully understand anything until you make those necessary connections of that this sound looks like that. And then you have the vocabulary and everything that comes in. And it's the same with music. It's just these sounds that come from your gut. You just like them, you know them, they're in you for whatever reason. Well, the reason is because that's how God made you. And you have this inclination to all these symbols. It comes from, when I said gut, that's a weird word in our culture, but the Bible calls it the cardia, your inmost being, you know, where your imagination, your affections all are. And that's where music resides in all of us. But like anything, it just needs to be trained and refined and glorified. Now, in this method, it is done in faith because it's not flashy what I'm doing. It's not a 5-year-old playing Mozart on YouTube. You've got kids singing Apple Tree and Bow Wow Wow, which doesn't look very impressive. But like I said, it's done in faith because you know it's a step-by-step appealing to their affections. And it's something that only time and careful shepherding can produce, this type of music literacy. So I just have an image for you, if you're not quite tracking with me. I like relating music to English a lot because it's my favorite subject besides music. So I thought of this image. You wouldn't have the desire to have your 5-year-old just read Tale of Two Cities just because they could pronounce the words. And it's impressive, and you can put it on YouTube and monetize it. You wouldn't want that for your child. I know this because you sit down, you read Dr. Seuss and Beatrix Potter for the 100th time. And why? Because you want to inspire your child to the imagination and the affections and the understanding that will eventually produce a very strong reader and a critical thinker. So that someday, when they do read Tale of Two Cities, they'll read it and they'll see what Dickens was trying to do. They'll see in between the lines the grand story of Christ's great sacrifice without even being written there. And it's the same thing with music. And I'm going to say it this way. We need to think about music this way. Because Bach didn't write his music to be played rote and mimicked like the person that played it on YouTube. He wrote it for worship. He wrote it for you to understand it, for you to see his joy, for you to see his grief, and you to worship God along with him in spite of that joy and grief. And, you know, he's done that successfully for centuries with so many human beings, even those that don't worship the one true God. Any questions?
Well, thinking about that, because if we go through a hymnal, usually, like we said, or I don't know if you're going to get there, but how the hymnal is kind of the traditional, the folk music of the church. And you do see Mozart and things like that in some of our hymnals, and they seem like simple tunes. But he's supposed to be this, you know, flowery, fancy classical composer. Why does it seem like it's simple, and even kids can sing those ones that we find in our hymnal?
Mozart
Sorry.
specifically?
That's what comes to my mind when I'm thinking of many of them, but it doesn't matter. Sorry to throw this on you.
I'm terrible because I'm going to go into rabbit trails. When you say Mozart, that just knowing that composer specifically, he was a master at writing memorable melodies. And so if a hymn writer chose his melody, it would have been for it to be very memorable and to stick in the people's ears. But he was a pagan. He was an awful, awful man. No judgment, but, you know.
But even though, well, so are we, in our hymnals, are we simplifying his music, or are we actually participating in it, the way he meant it?
Definitely simplifying it, I would say, yeah. But it's memorable, and it's beautiful.
Which I guess makes me the question of the difference between folk music and then the high art, the high form of it. If you can go down that quick.
Okay.
Yeah,
so you don't see a lot of people singing Bach in the church, which is a very high form of religious music. But that is because it is that high form of religious music, and there's an aspect of fittingness with music in the church. It's not necessarily fitting to have, okay, everybody, we're going to sing this Bach cantata, and no one can do it, right? It was meant for professional musicians. It was meant to be heard and to be understood in that way.
Well, and when people think of classical music, or myself sometimes, you might think it's more hoity-toity, or you're more of a purist and say that's just the most beautiful. I don't want to do low church things or the folky stuff.
Okay.
I want only that. And I believe as you were saying, with Kodai, there's more of looking at the people and seeing the traditional things, and then all those composers were using the traditional folk stuff.
Yes, because you see that is the roots of what people can understand and where their memories and their heritage comes from. And you build off of that for higher forms of art. Yeah, you see that in so many composers, for sure, yeah.
So they find the beauty that's common among the people there, and they use that beauty and then create something with it.
Glorify it, yeah. Yep, absolutely. Okay, so moving along, Kodai's methodology experienced an American revival, which is where we enter in, because we're not Hungarian. But this revival happened in the 1970s, and I've had the benefit of learning from two of the primary sources of this revival, actually, through you guys sending me to New St. Andrews, which is just incredible. I've learned from them and their students. It's a profound gift, so I thank you guys again for sending me to that program. One more year. The thing about NSA's program is that it's completely unique. No one else is like them because they're from a Christian and classical foundation. If you go and look up Kodai at home, you're going to find a lot of liberal strangeness. But we've taken it from them and we've evolved and changed it so that it does fit the Christian and classical tradition. The way that works itself out, primarily, is that the content that we're teaching the children is immersed in the paideia of the Lord. I don't know if you've heard that word paideia, but that's the word that the Apostle Paul uses when he talks about raising your children in the fear and admonition of the Lord. And so what that means for us is we're nurturing and cultivating the child of the Lord, which means we're nourishing them on the Word of God and the tradition of His church. So in a musical context, we could never have this program just be American folk songs. That would be stunted. For these children, the people's songs are the church's songs, which means it's the psalms and the hymns that we've had the joy of having for hundreds of years. Yeah, it's their heritage, right? So you'll see Mr. Dallas is always picking songs for them in the morning that are traditional hymns or are psalms, and they're memorizing the psalms through singing, and they're getting to participate in that grand history, that heritage with the traditional hymns.
It's songs that Christians have been singing for almost 2,000 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or the Psalms going back to the Israelites.
Right.
We get to sing along with the people of God.
Right. That's incredible. Yeah, and I confess I've poorly understood this in the past, and I think the modern churches as well, and we're missing out on such a treasure. The idea of the people's songs passed down from generation to generation, like you were saying, in the context of the church, it could only ever be these traditional hymns and psalms. And so like the classical tradition seeks to do with literature and art, we do have a litmus test to test if something is great or bearing truth, goodness, and beauty. And it's the fact that it's lasting. So we've seen that. These have been preserved for hundreds of years, but also their excellence comes from them being founded on the everlasting Word of God. Yeah, so I'm going to skip that point because I feel like I've really hammered that down. I think you guys understand. So I'm going to move on to the what of music literacy now. All this talk about music literacy, what does it practically look like?
And what is music literacy?
And what is music literacy? I'll get to that. But first, I'm going to give you some softballs of what's the end goals. Number one is always going to be the end goal. The equipped and therefore bold worshipers of God. The sound of a church singing should be thunderous, rafter-shaking, joyful sound. This corporate singing should be harmonious, right? And for the church, that means excellence in singing, whether in unison or in parts. And this is a beautiful image of the reality that God harmoniously unifies some really ragtag bunch of people that are complete opposites in so many ways, yet they can come together and make this beautiful, harmonious sound that is an echo of his songs. And number two, end goal. In order to truly be equipped and confident, one has to know the language. The main proof of this is that you're able to read. And in music, that means singing or playing unknown literature. Just open up a hymnal, get singing. Don't need a piano, don't need a leader. Which is pretty incredible that the church has really lost that. The other possibility with literacy is writing, right? If you think back to language, writing. That's an exciting possibility of having contextual songs for the local body written by the people who belong to that body. Being able to actually do that is a beautiful thought.
Well, and that's important in culture, right? If we're trying to build and create something good, true, and beautiful, we need to be able to do that rather than just critiquing everyone or tearing other things down,
Right.
and having our opinions about it, and then just going along with the flow and still consuming the old things. We can actually produce and compose beautiful things ourselves.
Right. Yep, absolutely. Okay, so what does the lesson look like? This is not going to be a deep dive. Calm down. This is so complex, so it's going to be very superficial. I'm starting with your kindergartner with the rudimentary elements of all music. So we have fast and slow, which is your tempo. We have high and low, which is your melody. And then you have long and short, which is your rhythm. Easy. You're all literate. We can go home. No, I'm kidding. These concepts gradually become more difficult, adding all the various parts that belong to each element. And so for melody, we focus on teaching the relationship of sounds, and we use Guido d'Arezzo's solfege from the medieval times, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, you know, Sound of Music. I know you know Sound of Music because your children come to me and they whisper, Mrs. Mueller, I know about fa and ti. And I'm like, okay, don't tell anybody. It's a secret. So this teaches tuneful singing, actually. When you're teaching what the difference is between do and mi versus do and re, it's teaching the muscles in your throat to always know that and to always sing tunefully then. It's very interesting how the ear is connected to the throat, and they're all connected up here somehow. It's a beautiful thing. And then for rhythm, we use rhythm syllables. If you put your child in piano lessons, they're probably learning a quarter note or a 16th note, and that's fine. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole about lessons or anything like that. But when it comes to actually understanding and feeling, we use these very silly rhythm syllables, but it's because they sound like how the music actually sounds. So instead of saying, this is a 16th note, we say, this is a tika tika. And it sounds funny, and they all laugh, but they'll always remember tika tika, 4 fast sounds, tika tika. That's a 16th group. And it just sticks in their ear. It sticks in who they are. I don't know. It works. But the most important part about this lesson is that it's all founded on developmental play. And so what I mean by that is that I'm teaching all of these concepts through them not knowing what's happening, basically. I'm like a magician. We're playing all these games, doing all these songs, and all of a sudden, I'm going to reveal to them what they know, what they've been doing, accomplishing. So how that works out is we'll play a game like Here Comes a Bluebird for weeks, and then one day, we'll sing comparative songs, other folk songs that sound like that, very similar, and then we'll draw it on the board. What's the contour of that melody and stuff like that? And then one day, I'll reveal to them that they know this glorious sound called la, and they're just like, oh my gosh, it's like Christmas morning every time. They're just so excited. It's amazing. My 5th graders, they find out that a song is pentatonic, and just the joy, they're just, who cares? But they just love it. It's so exciting, and I need more of that wonder in my life and that joy for sure. But what that comes from is this type of a lesson. One of the American pioneers of this, his name's Lamar Robertson, and he always says to his students from FaceTime in his nursing home now, to make your students glad they came. Make them glad they came. And so the lesson is about understanding the child and moving them from what they know to what is unknown, but also, and more importantly, it's centered on what brings them joy. The music that's already in them, and it's often bursting out when they're in kindergarten and 1st grade. They just can't contain it. But as a teacher, you're removing the veil from their eyes of what God has enabled them to do and enjoy, and namely, beautiful, joyful music making. And now they can understand it. Any questions? Keep going?
You can go.
Okay. So my last point is the why of music literacy. I've already said this many times that music is a language, so it has to be approached in that way. It's the best way to teach it, literacy being the goal. You not say to a person that they're English literate if they've never read the Bible or if they don't know who in the world Shakespeare is. You just couldn't say that. So it's the same for music. If you're not able to engage with the great works, and especially the folk tradition of the church, e.g. psalms and hymns, you're not musically literate. And there are degrees of literacy, of course, like all things, like math and English. There's degrees of it. But the other aspect of it being a language is that it's best to learn when someone is young. Your brain's still nice and squishy, and it can soak in all that information. You can teach an old dog new tricks, but it's much more time-consuming and tedious. But it's still worth it, so be encouraged. When you start a 4 or 5-year-old on this type of learning, they're still learning their own language. In their kindergarten class, they're still learning their own language. They're still starting to learn a mathematical language now too. And so you add music in, which is both a mathematical and a word art, and it just buffets it so lovely. Everything becomes more tangible and real.
Can I,
Go ahead.
some of us are old dogs.
Old, okay.
We want to learn new tricks.
You.
What might be a way to learn some new tricks? A note. Something you write monthly.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Well, yeah. So I do have my
A note?
a note from our music class. What is that called? Newsletter. I do have my newsletter that I send out. That does not involve music literacy, but it does involve being able to engage with musical works, which most of us have no idea. Like, I don't know, you turn it on and there's all this fruity music going on. So what I try to do in those newsletters is I try to break down the pieces for you. The recent one that I did was one by Bach, and I think I'm going to do a lot by Bach this year, so I hope you like Bach. If you don't, you will by the end of the year. I guarantee it. He's the best. So this last time through, I went through this whole thing. It was pretty extensive. I don't know if you guys read it or not. But it just was something that I was learning on my own and just so interesting. And he is one where it's just, if you're listening to him, there's a reason behind every note that was written. And it's like a little mystery, like a puzzle. So the themes and the variations and everything that happens in his pieces, they're very profound. And so I try to help you guys out there a little bit with being able to listen to that kind of music in your home, because I know it's hard. You don't know where to begin. We don't have the culture for that.
It's like, so with Morning School A, we're trying to read some of the great books, the great works that our kids will be listening to as they get older. And even if you can't make Morning School A, we recommend you do tackle some of those great books, or start off with some of the children's good books that we read in class so that you have some knowledge of it as well. This is just another resource of, I think, some of those great works in music where you know where to then start. Just one spot, we know to listen to this as a family, we can kind of talk about it.
Yeah.
And that helps harmonize, again, the culture that's going to be built between the home and the school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I just have one more point, and then I'm all done.
Okay,
So
then
if
I
you
got
have
a
questions.
question.
Okay. I'll do my last point. The greater why, which you all know, the greater why of all of this is that God has given singing and joyful music making as an intrinsic vocation for his people. So my catechism questions for the 4th and 5th graders, I was tempted to have them sing it, but I'm not going to do that. Question 1 and 2 is, why should we sing? So it's beautifully simple. Because our God sings, and we're made in his image, naturally. And why else should we sing? God tells us to sing, and we love him, so we keep his commandments. It's just our lives. This is how he made us. He calls us into the joy of being eternally praising people, and that's how he made us.
Would any 4th or 5th grader like to sing that?
You want to sing it?
Awesome.
Why should we sing?
Because our God sings, and we are made in his image.
Why else should we sing?
God tells us to sing, and we love him, so we keep his commandments.
Yeah, good job. And everything they just sang was pentatonic, which is what they're learning right now, and they're just swimming in completely. So as they sing it, this is all sounds they've learned. Their muscles know it now.
What is pentatonic?
Pentatonic is a 5-sound, penta, 5, tonic sound scale. And it's one of those simple scales that most music has actually been built off of. So I guarantee you know this one. Bum, bum, ba-dum, bum, 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 bum. Pentatonic song. Lots of your Asian music you'll hear sounds pentatonic. It is pentatonic. Native American.
Could you give us an example?
No, I'm sorry. I can go on there. No, I'm kidding.
That's what I was going for.
All your black keys. Go home and you'll play your own Asian music.
Oh, is that really?
All the black keys, that's a pentatonic. Yeah.
Oh, you learn something new every day.
Yeah.
We need to be continual learners. I did have a question. You said, are you done?
I'm done.
Okay.
Woo.
For the kids, we're teaching them, and this is the music coming out of them. So that's like with everything in the curriculum, where in classical Christian education, we have a high view of man, meaning the image of God is very important. But then we know there's a distortion, there's sin in everything permeating. So I do think that we seem to squash some of that, the musicalness in our own kids, that they do seem to be naturally want to sing and hum and things like that, and we squash it. But at what point, we do have to say ultimately, it's just not, the music in them isn't ultimately going to be good, true, and beautiful. Mm-hmm. They shouldn't go to the beat of their own drum, right? So do we have more of an answer? So,
and not squashing it?
Both. We don't want to squash it, but then also we're teaching the child according to their nature, I guess, maybe to clarify, not just the music that comes out of them.
Yeah. Well, I can answer the squashing part because I've been a bad parent before. The young ones, they're just exploring all of the possibilities of their voice. And so they're not going to sing in tune. They're going to be screechy up here, and they're going to be funny down here. And you definitely don't want to squash any of that silliness, because what they're doing is they're figuring out their physicality with singing. And we do a lot of that in class, actually, where they hear me make some strange sounds, and they're like, whoa, I can do that? And then we all do it together, and it's just wonderful. And you're trying to train them to be able to reach that head voice, that high voice, and also that strong belly, throat voice too. But as I have young children, so I'm trying to train them right now to love what's lovely, trying to train them to sing in harmony. And there's just a culture with that. My parents did a great job of that. They had a culture of singing in the home that was silly, but also was worshipful. And so car rides were not wasted. We were singing, and Dad was harmonizing, and all of us were like, what is that sound? And then eventually you've got Caitlin in back singing the bass line. And it's just a beautiful thing. You're just showing your kids that there's just so much more. It's very glorious. Yeah.
Yeah. And when we were first talking about our discussion tonight, you asked, why do I want a music program? And I gave you this big old answer. And later I thought, and I was like, well, because my dad used to sing to me. And I was thinking, growing up, hearing my dad in the morning, oh, what a beautiful morning, and just singing, being musical and singing along with us, even silly songs, that just is a part of me now. And I think of that with a lot of the sentiments and the desires, the affections I have towards things. That's part of that tradition aspect, the shaping, formational aspect of the curriculum is putting those sentiments in them and having the parents, the church, and the school all align where we're teaching these noble things, these beautiful things, that then as they grow up, they just have the right ordered sentiments. We have enough sin in the world that we're going to have to fight against. Lord willing, the sentiments we can place within them can be good as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and as far as, beat of their own drum, or I'm not, we don't foster a lot of that already but they are expressing themselves enough. It seems like there's a lot of expression happening. But also, as they get older, there's an aspect of composition where they are expressing them within the lines.
Yes.
You can use this, and this. Have at it. And that's what the Lord does with us. There's that sandbox. You do this. He gives us those giftings and everything. So it is fostering creativity and personality. If I give fifth graders free reign, I'm going to have all tika-tikas and the most impossible thing to sing ever, but they are so happy and they are so glad they stunted or they tricked me. It's just, yeah.
Yeah, it's like the true definition of liberty. There are constraints, right? There's constraints. And so everything when we teach, you receive a tradition, you're receiving it first, and then you're learning how to honor it. And then once you learn it, and you honor it, then you can have the freedom to start playing with it. That's where the joy comes in, once you actually learn something. And once you master it, you're more able to play with it. Once you master arithmetic, you can now play with the numbers and enjoy them. If you don't know arithmetic, then numbers won't be fun for you. You won't be able to play with them. But the person who actually masters it and it's part of their life, they can have fun doing things with numbers. That someone who's not number-minded or never learned is like, why are you enjoying that?
Yeah. Me.
All right, one more thing. We mentioned that music is moral. And when I was talking about Plato, I forgot to mention, and this was also part of where I was talking about how sin impacts music as well. In Plato's Republic, he defines justice, and part of it as harmony. When everything is rightly aligned and working according to what we would call a created nature. But he mentions in there that a teacher came to the Spartans and started teaching their children a different mode of music, and it was a softer mode. And after a generation, they started to be more effeminate, and they banned that mode of music, that song, and kicked the teacher out. And then he started talking about how there's other nation states and they all talk about it like it was obvious. And Boethius even talks about this is obvious that music is moral. There's different modes, there's different rhythms that shape us, make our bodies physically want to do different things. And some of them can lead to, there's a proper time and place for different types of rhythms, for different modes. But then there is a moral dimension to it. And I think the most terrifying thing is if you're given over to your fallen nature enough, all that dissonance that we have, right? Concord and harmony, we can hear it and it sounds nice. But eventually, if you're so given over to sin or just used to hearing bad music, wicked things, you actually think dissonance is good. you think wickedness is beautiful, that disorder is order, right? So that's one of the, when I was getting that child growing up, we do have those lines. That's important to say. There's a line and a structure we're giving them so that they can pursue good, true, and beautiful things. Otherwise, ultimately, we are sinful, and yes, our nature is going to impact everything, including music. And that's why churches today, they shape you. The music of the culture shapes you. And so, you have things like you're talking about, what is it, rafter shaking music, right? Versus the Jesus is my boyfriend type music. Those things, if you only hear one thing, it's going to shape you.
Yeah.
There's a difference between going to battle and hearing it and going on a date with your wife and hearing a different type of music. There's a proper time to hear it. You shouldn't be having hard rock where trumpets blaring as you're in a nice dining with the lights turned down.
There's a fittingness to it, yeah. Absolutely.
All right, should we throw out the cube of wisdom? Or?
Cube of folly.
Does anybody have any thoughts or questions? We have a little bit of time. And if you have anything that you want to come up with later, you can email the office at Imago Dei Classical School.org. And we'll put them on our blog publicly. You can be anonymous if you want, and we'll just answer them publicly. So if there's anything you've been kind of dwelling on, you can take more time. But anybody want to be thrown this awesome cube?
You want it. No, Brandon.
We'll do adults.
He just wants the cube.
All right.
We've done our job. No questions.
Yes, they know every single thing about our music program now. All right. Well, we now go ahead, have some refreshments out there. We got some cookies. I think you guys all volunteered and did it, so thank you so much. Let's end in prayer, and then we'll go enjoy the cookies. Lord, thank you for this evening and everyone who is here, able to make it tonight. Lord, thank you for the school again. Thank you for the community around us. May we honor you, and may we honor you in a way that we've been uniquely created. Lord, learning the art of word, the art of number, and here when we're talking about music, Lord, I pray that you would do something beautiful here at this school so that our children can be the next generation of God-glorifying music that glorifies you. It is true, it is solid, it is strong, it is good, and it is beautiful, so that we may praise you. Lord, we're here to love you and to love our neighbor, and may the music and harmony that we create, by your will, by your graciousness, may it honor you and glorify you, and may it lead to us enjoying you forever. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.